Six members of one family have been found shot to death in Amityville, Long Island.
I see 6 bright orange color lights, and they're like almost in a diamond or triangle shape.
Up in that direction, like a loud branch breaking, and then we looked, and there was this creature, and it ran down this hill, and then it disappeared.
And dogs and cats living together. Mass hysteria.
Hey everybody, welcome to Oregon Paranormal Radio. I'm Casey, and as always, I'm joined by Scott.
Hello.
What's up, buddy?
How you doing?
I'm good, man. How's China?
China's China.
China's China. Is China hot or is China cold?
China's hot today.
Nice.
China's hot today. We got a lot of people on the phone today.
We do. We've got 7 guests tonight. We're going to be doing a paranormal roundtable.
That's a record.
It is a record, and I think the best way to handle this one is we'll likely handle it like a panel. That way we're just kind of not all talking over each other, which can happen from time to time, especially when there's so many people. Not to mention, if you can't see the person, you don't know when they're getting ready to talk. So
This is a year's worth of radio shows for us in one show.
I know, right? Pretty much.
A year's worth of guests.
And I think all our listeners are actually on the show tonight, too. So this is perfect. So when I think of paranormal research, I think of places like the Society for Psychical Research in London and the Ryan Institute here in the U.S. And I think of people like Tony Cornell and Harry Price and Lloyd Auerbach. But a lot of people nowadays, when you say paranormal research or, ghost hunting or investigating, they immediately go to the Jason Hawes and the Zach Baggins, and the list just grows. And one of the things that's happened is it's become popular culture. And with that, there's been some good things and there's been a lot of bad things that have stemmed from it. And you get teams that pop up and then they disappear, and then there's teams that stick around. And some of the things that we notice is when we first started Oregon Paranormal, we did a lot of background work, and we got the paperwork set up and everything, and then we set up the website. But it wasn't until I got onto Facebook that I noticed that there was this community. And then I started noticing that there was also a lot of bad business practices and all sorts of just, nefarious things. So I thought, what better way to talk about it, but then to bring a collective group of people that are not only really good friends of ours, but are also respected in the field and people we work with on a regular basis. And on top of that, bringing in a business owner that has to deal with the influx of requests that come in all the time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on our guests for tonight. Representing Oregon, we've got Kristen Gray, White Light Paranormal.
Hello there.
We've got Jay Verburg from Oregon Paranormal.
Hey there.
Now we're jumping up to Washington. We've got Michael White.
Yes!
Paranormal Research and Investigations. We have Patty Valdez with Sound Paranormal Research.
Hello.
We've got Nicole Katsanes with the Autonomous Studies of the Enigmatic and Paranormal.
Hi.
I might be the only one around that can say that as well as it's being said.
I think so. You got my last name right and the group's name right.
And representing the business owners, we've got Katie Brown with the Old Wheeler Hotel. She is the owner and proprietor.
Hello.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. So likely we're going to ruffle some feathers, but I say the hell with it. A lot of this stuff needs to be talked about.
Yeah, it does.
Katie, do you want to start us off by talking a little bit about integrity?
From a business owner's perspective, I have witnessed groups that were profoundly professional and wonderful to work with, and many of them have become my friends. I have also witnessed the other side of it, where groups just wanted to make a name for themselves or use my building as a platform to project their group's name because they got in and somebody else did not get in. And so integrity is, it's multidimensional. You've got to think about the entities that you're representing that are there, and you have to think about the community, the paranormal community as a whole. There's so many people who are in this for name, and there are so many others that are in it for reasons to try to understand what is here. And so if you don't approach your passion with integrity, then you're not doing anything to enlighten the paranormal community as a whole.
It sounds like what you're saying is not just the paranormal community, but in order for us to be taken seriously, is we have to all have this level of integrity. I think you're right.
The levels of integrity have to do with your responsibility. If you're going to go down the path of investigating whatever might or might not be out there, integrity has to encompass the feelings of the owners of the homes or the businesses that you're at. It has to do with integrity towards the field as a whole, whether it is your methods of investigation. You can't just walk in and say, nope, nothing here, or, oh my God, there's so many here. A business owner, a homeowner, everybody, to keep the field honest, has to have some level of investigative tools handy that they can report back to that person what they are investigating. If the owner does not hear back from you, then there is no integrity for what they're doing. It was more of just a ghost hunt.
Exactly.
It was just a blind, wild weekend at some place without any thought behind what they were trying to contribute.
As Ben puts it, it's a hit it and quit it type of a thing, and we see a lot of that.
And I have seen a lot of that.
Another problem that stems from that is the legitimate groups, the groups that actually care, they end up essentially becoming a mop-up crew for these other teams that have gone in and made a complete mockery of what's happened with the location, and they've completely lost the trust of the homeowner or the business owner. And the business owner, now, because of the fact that that's kind of one of the only team they've ever actually dealt with, it's kind of soured them on everything as a whole.
Yes, it has. And when you own a business, your level of integrity is on the line every day with whatever guests or clients you have. The same has to be put out there with the groups that you welcome in. I stopped allowing any groups through here after my first 3 or 4 episodes, and it wasn't until years later that I started meeting some people that have integrity and have a passion for the truth and the honesty that I started letting people back through, but in a very, very limited way.
Kristen, you've been doing this for a long time. We've all been doing this for a long time, but what is it, when you hear Katie say stuff like this, I know you've had experiences like this as well.
Yeah, I think integrity is very important. You know, we go in when these clients are, I mean, many times when we're being brought in on cases that are, you know, in people's homes, they're in crisis mode. You know, they're scared out of their wits. So if we don't have an integrity about us, you know, what are we going to say to them? How do we expect them to react? You know, we're there to calm them down in their time of, you know, thinking that the demon from hell has invaded their home. And you know, it's our job to go in and calm them down and try to figure out, you know, what could be going on there and, you know, be calm and rational with them.
Have you run into issues where other teams or even, I mean, Casey, I think we talked about it a little bit. Sometimes we run into homeowners or people who aren't don't have the most integrity.
I think Casey and I have worked on a case before that was, we kind of got called in after they were called in, after another team or 2 or 3 were called in. So yeah, you do come across clients that don't have the best intentions too. And, you know, trying to weed through those and figure out, you know, who really needs our help and who just wants an episode of Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures to be brought on into their house.
I can't tell you how many times we've showed up at a location and somebody said, do you want us to lock you in? We said, no, we're good. You don't have to.
We've showed up at a case once, and they had like 15 people in the garage and wanted to watch it like it was an episode of some ghost hunting show, and that's not how we roll. So,
no.
People don't understand. You get those people that truly, like I said, want help, and then you get those people that just want a thrill, from us, and that's not really worth our time.
What's really important, though, to stress is that I think for the most part, most people generally feel like they're going in being responsible, and most people feel like they're going in with integrity. And it's easy to get caught up in the moment. It's easy to get caught up in the story. It's easy to get caught up in the lore. And it's easy for people to oftentimes forget, my responsibility isn't here for my own enjoyment and knowledge. My purpose is because the client called me. And so I only bring that up because I don't want to make it sound like, we're the few select group that do it right. And I'm sure at times we all fall under the category of missing the purpose for being there. But it's tough. You have to keep in balance and check it at all times, depending upon where it is you're investigating, whether it's a public location, whether it's a residence, whether it's a pay-for-play type of scenario. Everywhere is different.
I also think it's important if you do get caught up in the moment, because we all do, like, oh my God, I can't explain that right now. It must be something. When you go back and listen to your recordings and go back and watch the video footage, if you can debunk it, then have the integrity to go back and say, we were wrong. Like, we thought this was it at the beginning, but we found out differently now.
Absolutely.
So it's not just like, hey, we found something. Oh, we didn't. Let's just keep it hush-hush. Like, we're going to provide this evidence to our clients and to other people in the field and say that this is real when it really wasn't. Like, there's people who do that, but you can't.
And I think lack of ego comes in, too, because, not being so ego-driven that you can't say or admit, I was wrong, or I put this out there, and you know what, now I have found out this isn't wrong, this isn't what I thought it was.
Exactly.
And being able to, take responsibility for that.
What do you think, Patty?
As far as the integrity, I think we all have gotten into the paranormal communities and into groups because we're looking for something, and we should be able to provide a level of comfort, like Kristen was saying, and also realizing that as a group, and we go into a location, we're going in representing our community. And there are some people that do it better than others, some people that are more technological, if you will, some people that use more of the metaphysical in it. But I think the outcome is that we want to provide whomever is our client an atmosphere and knowing that they're not crazy, that's the first thing, and that they may have paranormal activity in their location, yet know that we are there to document it for them. That's basically it.
Right.
I like something that you just said, Patty, and it kind of is, what is our focus? Is our focus on what are we going to find? What are we doing? How is this going to help us as a team? Or is it, these are our clients, these are the people we're looking at, we're trying to help them,
Very much so. I think that's what gets lost up in a lot of the paranormal out there. We've been around for a while. We've worked with everyone who's on this panel tonight. And, it gets to the point where, like Kristen said too a minute ago with the egos and that, we're out there to help a client out. We're out there to discover, the answers to the unknown. None of us know exactly what we're doing, if you will, because every time we think we know what we're doing, something changes. And so, we're there to provide a platform for the client to say, hey, I think I'm crazy. This weird stuff is going on. We sit through it. We listen to them. We look at their pictures of orbs, and we explain to them what an orb is, and for the most part, and we just try to give them that level of comfortability that, you're not crazy. Your house isn't going to go fall into the depths of hell or what have you. And that, that's the reason we're here. We're here to help you.
Yeah, well, I think everybody on this panel, I agree with you, but it also sounds like that's not what everybody out there is doing, unfortunately.
I think some teams get into the thrill of it's more about them and the thrill of what they're getting out of it instead of what they're doing for their clients.
Right. And I think a lot of teams, I mean, we started in 2006 as a team, and at that time you couldn't throw a stick and not hit a half a dozen paranormal or ghost hunting teams within your given community. A lot of that has been weeded out in the past, 10 years now. There are some teams that come out, they've been around for a year or two, and they're like, we know everything. But when they soon realize they're not going to be on a television show, no offense, Jay, but they kind of like say, well, why are we here? And then there's always something going on. We want to be on a television show. We want to do this. We want to be this. We're the number one team out there. Really? What are you doing that all of us as a community haven't done before?
Exactly.
So one of the things, though, that I wanted to point out is that there's a big difference between integrity and respect as well. So oftentimes, I think you can identify the integrity in the initial walkthroughs and getting to talk with the client and meet them, and the client feels comfortable with you. That's where integrity really holds up. What happens beyond the integrity is the respect. And when you start, and to the client, especially Katie, who not only works in the hotel, but also that's her home, you have to listen and you have to abide by the boundaries that she sets for her own, not only sanity, but for what she feels she's comfortable letting guests come in to stir up the possibilities. So, it kind of goes hand in hand, but beyond integrity, the respect is the one thing I feel you need to maintain across the entire investigation.
I agree.
One of the things that I experience living here after an investigation or after somebody is psychically gifted, where it kind of stirs the pot. I don't have one or two here. I have hundreds of them here. And after they leave, there is a certain level of discomfort. I don't see them, I don't hear them, but I do feel them. And there is a certain level of discomfort before they can settle themselves down again. And I don't know that someday I would love to have one of you stay here after an investigation so that you can understand what happens in a place that has a number of entities, how it's almost like a group of kindergartners that have been to the zoo. They are so excited and they are so active that the aftermath from an investigation is intense. Here, I don't know if anybody else has ever mentioned that before, but that was another reason why I stopped doing investigations, because living with the aftermath of this place was very, very uncomfortable.
That's one of the things that Scott and I would always reiterate to all our clients before we would do an investigation, is just want to let you know that once we leave, it may be a bit more active than normal.
Yeah.
And I think as long as the teams are going in there respectfully and they're being forthright, especially with the clients, and letting them know that these are some of the consequences by actually having a team come in, I think that helps. But it, again, doesn't help the actual, and I like the way you put it, you call them your residents. And that's the difficult part, because even though we've explained it to the client, it's harder to explain it to a resident that you're actually investigating. I mean, it's like, how do we convey that to them on a level that they can understand to lessen that activity after a group has left?
And we've even had cases where from the minute they've contacted us, activity is picked up. From the minute they've phone called and talked to us on the phone, it's like the spirits know that we're coming. So activity picks up. So letting them know that, it might get a little crazy around there is very important.
Is there anybody that is on this panel tonight that has stayed after an investigation somewhere? And I mean, other than Katie, obviously. I'll take that as a no.
What do you mean stayed? Like moved in, stayed for a few hours, stayed for the night?
But, stayed overnight, or something like Katie said, is that after you leave, that's when most of the stuff picks up. Is there anybody who's their team's left and they've stayed after for a little while to?
I have a place that I actively do tours at once a month, And is when everybody leaves, activity kind of picks. I mean, it's the same thing Katie's talking, and a lot of times it'll depend on certain people that might show up on the tour or certain people that are there, how activity picks up. But yeah, usually after everybody will leave, activity, and we hang out for a while, activity's buzzing down there.
And I've actually, I'm kind of numb to the possibility of anything paranormal happening to me on an investigation. But the one time I experienced something at the Wheeler with the doorknob rattling and the door opening was the day after we'd had the Halloween type casual basement investigation, but everybody was just about gone. And that's when I had that experience there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to chime in and say, too, like when we do the Lewis County Historical Museum, one of the things that we do when we leave after an investigation, or there was just this past weekend, William Becker and Karen Frazier did a psychic awareness class there, is to basically tell them you're leaving and let them know. I mean, you're trying to communicate with the spirits or the residents like Katie has down at the Wheeler, and basically let them know, hey, we're leaving, but we'll be back again, just as you would any other guest or any other person that you see.
Right.
So that's I think that's just one of those courtesy things that you kind of do. You know, you're talking to them the whole time. They're excited. They're trying to communicate with you. Just like Katie was saying, like a kindergarten kids, they're trying to communicate with you. Let me show you this. Let me say this or whatever they want to do. And then you just like pack up your stuff and leave. Mm-hmm. And they're just sitting there in the corner going, hello.
Maybe this is a good way to transition to one of the topics tonight was the best practices, the do's and don'ts of researching or going out. And I know we've seen a lot of things, and so are there things that people like, this is a definite no when you're on an investigation with our team?
Nicole, you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. Definite no for us is don't be an asshat. I mean, you have to, I mean, we don't want a piss pot, borderline. We'll take that.
Wait,
Sorry.
Can I get this spot still? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
You're grandfathered in.
Okay.
You're good. No, we don't want people who we can't trust. If we can't trust you, you're not going to work with us, plain and simple. We don't let people do any substances. We don't drink. We don't do any drugs, none of that on our cases. And basically just being aware of what you look at as Jay's. Thank you, Jay. That's perfect. Look. No, I mean, I think we kind of have similar rules to what most good groups out there, respectful groups have. But mainly we're just, make sure that your client is your number one priority. And you are making sure that you're doing right by them, you're doing right by your group, and you're doing right by our community as investigators. And if you're doing that, I think we're golden.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think you have to be incredulous in the sense that, if something happens, you don't go jumping up and down screaming, oh my God, that type of thing. Because if you're doing it at home residents, that's going to scare the living daylights out of them. Because you get to leave at the end of the evening, but they're staying there. So that's definitely a no-no. And another one for our group is no weapons. You're allowed to bring a small pocket knife, but you're not carrying your guns and all this other stuff that people carry with them nowadays because there's no reason to do so.
Absolutely. And you see those things in the news all the time, especially I think it was last year at the Villisca Axe Murder House. They had a guy who was on an investigation who just out of nowhere just started stabbing himself with his own knife.
I think it's important, too. We have a safe word. So it's like, and I forgot the safe word. So I can't tell you the safe word, but we've been on in it before where it's like we wanted the hell out of there. Right. And it was like, okay, so-and-so just texted and we got to go. So I think having a way to get yourself out of a situation, too, is important.
I also think along those lines is being able to communicate with your team. Like if you're in a situation that you're not personally comfortable with, being able to tell your team like, hey, I need to leave. I can't be here right now, and excusing yourself and going outside or going to a different room because you don't want to taint the investigation. And if your client is there with you and you're freaking out, that's not going to do anyone good. So you have to know your limits and be able to step back if need be.
The problem is that 90% of the time, though, I've been possessed by a demon, and I can't say those things. I want to, but I can't.
But we all know that. It's fine.
Okay.
That's why we don't let you carry weapons, Jay.
Oh, okay.
That's why we let you drink, but only you.
Okay.
Michael, what are some of the things that you do or don't do on investigations with you? What do you think on this?
Number one, I don't do a whole lot of investigations anymore. I stick primarily with the research because, quite honestly, too many times we were going in there with the guys, the same thing that every group says, we're going in there to help people, but at the end of the day, what have you really done? So I've pretty much, anytime I'm contacted to do an investigation, I let them know I'm there to collect information. I would gladly give it to you, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to solve your problem.
Right, and I think that I think is a perfect response because it shows that there's honesty there.
Right. Well, they're living there 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. We go in there for 4 or 5, even 10 hours. The chances of us actually capturing anything that they've experienced is pretty slim.
Right.
When you look at that time frame. So
at the same time, you've provided a little bit of validation or credibility to their concerns or fears that you're willing to stop, listen, and research something that might be putting them in fear. So just doing that oftentimes is quite a bit of help.
Right.
But it isn't always about fear. It's about answering questions. When I bought this place, I had no concept of what a ghost even was. And I recognized that there were things happening, constant anomalies that I couldn't explain. And I wasn't afraid of them. I just wanted to understand what was happening.
So as a business owner, as somebody who has this going on, what are the things that when you see investigators come in, what are things that you're like, oh, no, don't do that in my establishment?
Poking them or offering me something that I recognize intuitively is not true or correct, doing an investigation and then never hearing from them again. Mm-hmm. After 7-8 years here, I kind of have a feel for which permanent residents are where. If somebody offers something new, I look at where their frame of reference is. Do they want to, are they feeling nothing and they want to offer something? Or is there a new permanent resident I didn't know about before?
Right.
I think it'd be interesting to have this conversation with like Neil and William too. That's what they back up can't necessarily be verified in that moment too.
Right.
Or I might be speaking incorrectly about their abilities, but
what I have found here is the repetition of the validation from different people who don't know each other, say the same thing about the same place. Guests that are not psychic, that are not investigating, offer the same story when they come out to breakfast in the morning. That to me is validation. That there is that particular entity in that particular space. I'm always open to hear new experiences, but until I can have the validation of different people not knowing each other, repeating the same story, I really don't lend any credence to it.
Yeah, I think the validation part, especially when, like you said, the people that are coming through your establishment on a regular basis that are experiencing these things, the fact that they're all honing in on a specific thing that's happened, but they don't know who the next person is and have never had any contact, never heard any of the stories. I think you're spot on. I think that those are
precisely, yes.
Yeah.
So different groups that have come through, when certain people repeat a feeling or an EVP, they offer up EVPs from an area that are consistent. Mm-hmm. That tells me that there is some validity to that particular entity. Whatever is there. I wish I could understand them. I wish I could hear them. I wish I could see them. But I always appreciate the repetition as it comes.
Right. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into a whole bunch more that we haven't even touched on yet. So we'll be right back.
You're listening to Morning Paranormal Radio.
Welcome back to the show. If you're just joining us, we've got Jay Verburg, Katie Brown, Kristen Gray, Patty Valdez, Michael White, and Nicole Katsanes on the line. And we're chatting about all things late. Well, actually, the first part of the show, it was a lot of bad in the paranormal. And unfortunately, I think that the second half will probably be that as well. But we'll try and sprinkle in some goodness here and there. So last week, I had a conversation with another paranormal investigator here in the state, and he was looking for some advice. It's like, how do you keep the passion going in this field? And one of the things that he had said in the conversation really stuck out with me. So I asked him today if I could quote him on it, and he said, absolutely, go for it. When he sent me the message, he said, all the folks I've worked around for many years all had the idea that the more followers, popularity, and headlines you got made you the best. So you had to do better at promoting yourselves, your group, and be essentially better than the next guy. And that kind of shocked me. I didn't realize how bad it actually is, because we, on the Oregon Paranormal front, we've disconnected from a lot of the drama that kind of plagues a lot of the other groups in the area. And so that kind of shocked me. I didn't realize how bad it actually is in certain areas. And my straight up response with them was, whoever told you this is in this for all the wrong reasons, and it's a bunch of bullshit, plain and simple. But it was just kind of surprising to me.
That's how we end up with the explicit tag on the iTunes.
I dropped the S-bomb this time. I beat Jay to it.
I think that's kind of a naive way of thinking. I think a lot of people who get into the field do it for the right reasons. There's people who get into it for the wrong reasons because they're watching these shows and they glorify it and they want to be, ghost hunters.
Right.
And so those are the people and those are the groups that feel like you have to have 1 million followers and you have to be out there constantly promoting yourself and getting your name out there, good or bad. The problem with getting out there and doing whatever it takes is, yeah, you're going to get a lot of people following you, but you're not necessarily getting the positive feedback and the positive outlook that you want.
Right.
Just because you're well known doesn't mean you're doing anything respectful, that you're doing anything right by your client or right by the field.
Right. Pretty much everybody can have a Facebook page these days,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the difficult part, is that there's so much misinformation that's being pumped out through Hollywood, through the TV shows, and through a lot of teams that don't know any better, that are replicating things they've seen on TV. It's a difficult one, and as soon as somebody starts a Facebook page, the public will flock to it and say, "Oh, hey, look at this! I'm going to start following them," and then it kind of blows up from there.
How come nobody watches these shows and walks away wanting to become a miner? God damn it. We need more miners.
Well, those groups that you're talking about that have Facebook pages, they're always posting, and they're pretty easy to pick up because the posts are always have something to do with fear. Would you, spend a month in this haunted house for $10 million? And they're showing these pictures, and it's every day bombardment of this. And it's so much of it is just, hey, look at me, look at us. And there's really no substance to it. So it's kind of sad.
From what I've learned through my wife and the business that she runs and how she operates her Facebook page, is that the way the filtering system works through Facebook is the more that you're on Facebook and the more posts you do, the more you actually are engaging with your public. And I think that that's their way of doing that. And, I look at it as though if I don't have anything to post that's, worth posting, then okay, I'll wait a day or I'll wait 2 days. But yeah,
well,
there's a lot of crap out there.
That goes back to your integrity thing. I mean, if
Right.
a lot of people don't even post their own stuff, they just share and like and, just repost things that other people post, which is fine. I mean, that's how people want to use their Facebook. That's how they want to use it. But I think for your group to do it right, you need to post your own thoughts and your own ideas. And, that's not to say you can't just share somebody's stuff. That's fine. But that can't be your only thing. And you can't just be, like Michael said, fear mongers. Like, you can't just be like, oh, look at this, you need us to come out. Like, you can't do that. That's
Speaking of fear mongering, did you hear the San Andreas fault is locked and loaded for an earthquake?
Bring it.
It's on the weather report.
But as we talk about this stuff, I want to make mention that none of us are sitting here saying we have all the answers and we all do it right every time, because we're all guilty of at times reposting posts that we describe. I guess the reason I bring this up is I don't want your listeners to think, oh my gosh, I do that. Do people think I'm an idiot for doing it this way? Again, it all goes back to that integrity. In fact, the question started with, what do you think we possess that truly helps the field? And outside of the social aspect of it, the only thing I can say is sharing with each other in an open platform and constantly modifying your techniques and trying something new. Right. I think are the single best things you can do to help this field. Otherwise, we're going to be using K2s for the next frickin' 100 years, which I don't believe are providing any further steps or further information. Again, I've always stated, I don't think we'll ever find an answer, but we'll always find another stepping stone to help progress our thinking and our research. Right. And that's what needs to happen. And unless we can share those, and, Michael, I gift you with that wonderful compliment of always trying new things and experimenting with different processes. If we aren't sharing that information, we will all be using K2s forever.
Right.
We have to try something new.
And that's key. I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I think sharing of information, there are so many teams that don't want to share the data they're collecting, but you look at doctors and scientists, and if they weren't sharing the information that they're figuring out with lab work and their background research, then, where would we be as a society without that sharing of knowledge and information?
That's right. If Leeuwenhoek would have kept his little microscope to himself, we would have probably died from a head cold at some point.
I think that question is kind of twofold, because one is the confidentiality between the group and the client, so sharing that information. But I think it's also, like you were saying, important, and I know the Pacific Northwest has probably one of the best and most outstanding field of paranormal investigators out there, because we do share, we do talk. Mm-hmm. And where I know other people, and I wish Nicole Strickland was able to join us tonight, because she'll probably talk to you about that. It's so, doggy dog, if you will, down in Southern California with the groups. But I think it's one of those things where, yes, information is shared, but I think in the most part that the information that is shared is taken at face value. Mm-hmm. And nobody's going to say, oh, you're an idiot because you thought you saw this and this, and, you thought, you saw this ghost or apparition in this picture, and it's not that, it's this, speck of dust or whatever it is. But again, I think one of the biggest thing is the not sharing in some ways is because of the confidentiality between you and the client.
Well, and that's a good point. And I think that those lines kind of get muddied every once in a while, because it's not necessarily that we're trying to share the information on the client basis, but like, for instance, this case that we're working right now, we're tracking weather patterns for the entire month, and then we're tracking the weather pattern for the actual night of the investigation. So that way, if we can correlate anything as far as activity goes, does that information have to do with, a thunderstorm or the humidity that was outside or the barometric pressure indoors? I think that kind of data will help a lot of investigators down the line eventually. And I'm hoping that a lot of investigators are doing that kind of data, and we're probably not seeing it. But I think that kind of stuff can be shared, and techniques. And
I was going to say, processes, procedures, and techniques.
Yeah.
Those are the three big things that you can provide detailed information on how you conduct investigations or experiments, but you don't have to give away details like where you did it, who you were doing it for. That's one of the saddest things I have right now is an entire database of old mines, ghost towns, abandoned communities, all these things. And I'm so afraid to share those things because I know people will go and cause damage.
Or exploit it.
Exactly. And intentional or not, some of these places are pretty special to me. Mm-hmm. But I can still at least talk about some of the procedures and ways about going and doing an investigation that might possibly lead to better EVPs, better results, data, whatever.
I think that talks about kind of what Patty was saying, and the same thing, Jay, is that if you're sharing this stuff, why are you sharing it? Are you sharing it because you want fame or you want something, or because you're trying to get help for your client? I mean, what's the focus again?
Right.
To me, the big thing is more of the research. So if I can do something, if I try a specific technique while doing EVP work or whatever, the first thing, if I got a result, which I believe is a genuine result, the first thing I'm going to do is come back to the people who I feel are credible investigators and say, hey, the next time you're doing an investigation, try this process. I want to know if it helps, if it hinders, what happens when you do this. To me, we're not dealing with one particular spirit that reacts one particular way. We're dealing with a level of communication that may help on a grand scale for people to, again, that next stepping stone.
Well, and that's the nice part about going back to Michael and his experiments and being able to kind of see his process, and then you lay it all out in this finely tuned document, and then you put it out there on the website for people to download and to read up. That way they can actually go and reproduce the same experiment and possibly be able to offer up some possible tweaks or even replicate the same data.
Exactly. And, that's the closest thing to a peer review that we have in this business.
Right.
Because, most of us are not scientists. I think it was Nicole, was it Jeff Meldrum that you guys interviewed about the Bigfoot? Yeah.
Yes.
And I think he coined a phrase called us basically citizen scientists. And I really like that term because, my degrees are in psychology and sociology, so I'm not going out there and doing any kind of work in physics when I'm working with the paranormal. Mm-hmm. But I can apply some of those, experimental ideas and processes as we go through some of these experiments. But yeah, definitely giving that information out as well as the experiments so other people can duplicate it. Because if they come up with conflicting results, I really want to know that because that opens things up.
Right. And it could shut doors on things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once upon a time, everybody believed that the world was flat because they didn't know any better. And the paranormal world is so new that every time there is something done responsibly, it opens the doors to continue the investigation to understand what might or might not be there.
Right.
Wait, the world's not flat?
Only for you, buddy.
Okay.
So I want to go to one of my favorite topics, and that's cringe words, because I've got quite a few that I hate, and I know that there's probably quite a few that all of you hate that are used within this community.
I was going to say, I bet you there's one word that we all cringe at, and it was our first word when you mentioned that.
Jay?
No!
I was going to say piss pot.
Sweet baby Jay.
I think Patty was the one who actually touched on that one. Yes.
Good old orbs.
Oh, I was going for the word ghost hunter.
Mine's ghost hunter.
Yeah,
I
ghost
absolutely
hunter. I hate
detest that.
Mine is just flat out ghost. I hate that. I hate the word ghost. It's so disrespectful. It's so overused that you don't. It's disrespecting the entity or the possibility that the soul or whatever energy is left.
Spirit.
Wow. Yeah.
So
I never thought about that before, but that makes perfect sense.
I refuse to call the entities here in my building ghosts. They are my permanent guests.
And that's a good point, Katie. But you're looking at biblical times using the terminology ghost and that. But I think in the 2016s, yes, there are spirits, spectrums, ghosts, permanent residents, all kinds of terminology, and I think that's part of our responsibility to the world out there is to educate people on things like that.
But can we come up with a word that is kinder than ghost?
Oh, sure. I don't disagree with you on that. It's just one of those things where the person out there, watching the television shows or reading in the books or what have you, they're used to saying ghost. That's the only thing that I'm saying is that through education, and then hopefully that's what we're doing to the communities out there through paranormal, is educating them more on, hey, you can call it a ghost, you can call it a spectrum, you can call it an apparition, you can call it whatever you want to. We personally do not know what it is. That's all I'm saying.
Eventually, get to a point where we can say, yeah, we're dealing with the consciousness of somebody who's still here after bodily death.
But that's what's tough is even humans can't collectively define consciousness. So how do we define it for those that have transitioned?
Well, we have to find that out by using a ghost box.
Oh.
Yeah.
And wearing your T-shirts 3 sizes too small.
That's true. But by the way, Jay, your extra small shirt is on the way.
Oh, thank you.
No, thank you.
One of my favorite cringe words is para-unity, and I don't like it. And this is one of those things going back to when we first jumped on social media. I started noticing the word para-unity, and I've been doing this off and on since about 1992, 93, and I'd never heard of the word or the term until I jumped on Facebook and started up a page, and all of a sudden you'd see memes of hands shaking with like a ghost in the background that says para-unity, and I didn't know what it was. And so for a while there, I was like, hey, that's kind of cool. That's neat. But then I started noticing that there were a lot of teams that were using para-unity, but they were the same teams that were putting information out there that wasn't necessarily good information. They were putting out, pictures with ghost apps. And then as soon as somebody would challenge them, they would go, hey, para-unity, we're all in this together. And
kind of like it's a free pass.
Yeah.
It's like, why does there need to be a catchword for adults acting like adults?
And again, going to doctors and scientists, you don't see them proclaiming science unity. They don't do that. And so why can't we all just be adults and work together? I mean, everybody on this panel tonight, we're all adults. We've worked together. I don't think we've all ever proclaimed para-unity when we're doing an investigation together.
You should have a secret handshake, though.
We should. And a safe word like Kristen, right?
No, that's Jay. I won't tell Jay.
And matching T-shirts.
I would pause, though, and say, rewind the tape and listen to it and ask yourself, are we really all that adult-like on this radio show or anything? Like, we have our moments of...
Always, Scott.
This is the thing. I think I was on mute and I yelled this. When Kristen said this, I said, when do you ever know adults to act like adults? I don't know adults to act like adults.
I can fake and act like an adult sometimes.
Well, I can fake it, but I'm not really doing it. Yeah, no. So that's why I'm like...
Scott, stop with the paradrama, okay?
Yeah.
Paradrama.
Hey, Scott, by the time I'm done editing this bad boy, this is going to be as dry as a PBS documentary.
No wonder we don't have any listeners. So I want to go to the other thing. I wanted this because I wanted to bring up another word that I hear. It's not a cringe word for me, and so maybe I'm asking for more clarification on this. And I've heard people talk about debunking is some people's cringe word. I don't know. Please educate me and tell me why this is like the N word of paranormal research.
There is a video on YouTube taken in room 3 of apparently a ghost going back and forth across the television. And if you go to debunk.com, a number of people have explained why that didn't happen, why it wasn't real, and I'm kind of grateful for it. But there is a whole website out there about finding these anomalies on YouTube or wherever, and they debunk them. And they could explain exactly why that phenomenon happened in that room at that time. It's kind of responsible, I think.
Well, it is very responsible, but the problem when you go in to say, we're going to debunk this, it means that basically you're going in to say right away, I already don't believe what you're telling me, and I'm going to prove you wrong, versus going in with an objective mind and saying, I'm going to sit here and experience for myself and see what it is I get and determine from my own personal experiences, which again may not be what you experienced, and then we're also dealing with human perception. So just because you experience something one way doesn't mean I'm going to experience it the exact same way. So to go in debunking has kind of a negative connotation to those that truly want to do and have an open mind and experience and process the data. That's just my take on it.
Well said.
Like, I think when somebody posts something that they believe is a legitimate piece of evidence, and you start off with a debunking attitude, it's really harsh because, man, it's like going and stepping on some kid's sandcastle for the most part. You'll notice there's a lot of videos online and so forth, and quite honestly, I love looking at some of those and quote-unquote debunking them. But I don't think that I would use those terms when I came across with it. There's a lot of false evidence posted as legit. There's probably more false evidence posted than actual evidence from investigations. And those are the ones that circulate. The things where the guy is walking down the hallway and then suddenly being knocked over by a shadow and then dragged the opposite direction. I mean...
Wait, that's not real?
No, I'm sorry. It's not, but it sure looked cool. But that hardly ever happens.
Well, and that's the difficult part now is that, everybody can have Adobe Premiere and After Effects. Like you look at that video that was out there not too long ago. It went viral for about a month of the guy running down this little street and he gets hit by lightning. And then a minute later he gets up and then he gets hit by lightning again. And everybody's like going, oh, my God, I can't believe this guy actually survived and blah, blah, blah. Well, if you actually you take that critical lens, which I think is important when you're looking at anything, not just to, set out to debunk it, but to look at it with that critical thinking cap on. But when you go and you look at that video and you go frame by frame, there's one thing that really stands out in that video. When that lightning strikes, the shadows in the image don't change. Mm-hmm. And I think that is kind of an important thing when you're looking at these videos because there is a lot of stuff out there, like you said, that's being put across as legit. And
well, the sad thing is, though, like there are a lot of fake videos out there, fake footage, whatever, and so it makes it hard for us as legitimate investigators to put something out there.
Right.
Because now there's the fear of, oh, someone's going to immediately shoot it down. That's CGI. You rigged it. I'm going to debunk it. It's like, well, you weren't there. You can't really debunk it. You can give your opinion on what you think it is, but you can't say what I saw and what I'm providing you, if that is what I actually saw, is fake.
And that's the difficult part.
It is. So then it makes us not want to put it out there because of the fear of people just putting it down and saying, it's fake, you rigged it. So then we kind of hold off.
I agree with Nicole because there's a lot you can't tell just looking at a photo. You don't know what's happening right then and there. You don't know what might be being experienced by maybe psychic mediums that you have there at the moment. You just have this picture that's captured and you put it up there and it's everybody's goal to try to prove it's a fake, unfortunately.
Right. Well, it's like we have a video up on our website of a rectangular light. And
I
we don't
freaking
claim
love that video, Patty. I love that video.
We don't claim it's anything, but we would like somebody to explain it to us. And it's up there. I mean, it's been up there for the past 5 or 6 years now. And it's a phenomenon that happened. We're not saying that it's real. It's not real. We just said, hey, we can't explain this. Is it paranormal? Yes. The reason it's paranormal is because we can't explain it.
Right.
That's it.
But not necessarily that every single time you can't explain something, it's paranormal.
Right.
True.
That's correct. That's correct, Michael.
Demons.
That's it.
How can you be a legitimate? I was gonna say, how can you be a legitimate
demon
paranormal
busters?
How
I am
could you
a demon
possibly-
buster.
How could you possibly use the word demon on Friday the 13th on a radio show that thousands are now going to be infected with? Thank you.
I forgot. Happy Friday
Saturday the 14th. Saturday the 14th.
I love that movie.
Saturday the 14th.
You guys
Pazuzu sends his regards.
You guys bring up the term demon. I recently had a conversation with Lloyd Auerbach that you mentioned earlier in the show, and I was asking him about all these teams out there saying they're scientific, because that's my pet peeve. Because there's so many things that deal with actually being scientists and using the terminology scientific.
Right.
And he jokingly said, "Yeah, the same teams that say they're scientific turn around and go, 'Oh, I think we got a demon in this.'" So I mean, it's just kind of to me, I found it humorous, because it's one of those things where it's like you're saying you're scientific because you're using technology, but you don't necessarily know why that or how that technology works. As Michael said earlier, he doesn't have an advanced degree in physics, biology, chemistry. He has advanced degrees in other areas. He does controlled experiments, but he's a researcher. He's researching this. He's not a scientist, and I think that's what hurts the community in some ways too. Is you get these teams out there say, we're scientific. We do scientific methods. You do research methods.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up Lloyd Auerbach, because here's another topic that is something that I've really noticed over time. And matter of fact, Jay and I had a good conversation about this last week. And what the modern day ghost hunting community and TV shows have done to the field of parapsychological work. So parapsychology as a field, it's been getting kind of a bad rap lately. And Jay, you had a conversation not too long ago with Neil about the effects that Lloyd has been dealing with.
Yeah, Neil was describing how there was one of the TV shows that had gone out and done an investigation and made a claim, and Lloyd Auerbach, who had been studying this place for quite some time, basically had come back and said, great, you got your readings from your investigation, but I've been studying this place for years, and here's what we've got documented. Nobody bothered to corroborate with that. Again, we're dealing with television, so people aren't always looking for the most accurate information to portray versus what is exciting. But it had a very negative impact on his image, because the fans of the show pushed back on Lloyd to say, you're wrong. And it's very negatively affected him. Mm-hmm. And I feel terrible. I don't know. I've never met Lloyd. I've never had a discussion with him. But I have a great deal of respect for anybody who can dedicate their passion of investigating and research to be questioned and shamed because a television show and their set of crazed fans can do a lot of damage.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, because there's so much good information out there that has been done over the years that is being ignored and forgotten about.
Yeah,
and I don't know. It's a bummer.
It's interesting. So Neil and I have been chatting, and we're trying to plan this trip to Colorado for a parapsychology convention, where there's going to be some incredibly great intellectual thinkers and speakers and educators there. And it's interesting to see the words parapsychology, and all of the topics are discussing consciousness, not ghosts, not transitioning energies, not any of this. It's all going towards consciousness and what the human perception is on so many of these oddities that we're experiencing. Because that's truly the fascinating part of all this, is without the human aspect of this, there is no such thing as a ghost or another entity or a demon or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I agree. when it comes to consciousness, I think that's something I definitely want to learn more about as the information becomes more available and as it becomes more understood.
We moved so far away from the ghost hunting aspect that we actually let our ghost hunting tags expire this year, so that we can't even go ghost hunting.
You won't be mounting any ghosts on your wall?
Well, not this year.
At one time, one of my biggest cringe words was the word evidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just because they say, oh, well, we went out and did a 12-hour investigation and we've got, 96 hours of evidence. And it's like, no, you don't. you have 96 hours worth of data you got to go through to find the evidence. But
how do you guys feel about the mislabeling of activity in a house? And how do you feel the effects on the client are when the research isn't done on that location? And it's just kind of just thrown out there just to say, this is what you got. Sorry, we can't help you past that.
It goes back to the integrity issue, as well as being a responsible person. Really, we don't know what we're really dealing with, and to come up with a concrete answer at the end of anything is ridiculous.
Right.
I think it does a huge disservice to our clients to just come in and say, we've been here for 3 hours, boom. Here's a label for you. It would be nice if we could do that. It would be really nice to say, here's exactly what it is. We know 110%. Here's how to deal with it or live with it, fix it, whatever you want, and be done. But we can't do that.
Right.
We cannot. And for anyone to go in and say, no, I can say that you are 100% haunted by a 5-year-old girl because I took a picture of it, that's doing a huge disservice. I mean, what if that's not the case?
Right.
And what if it is something else? And now you have a client who thinks this is the end-all, be-all because this credible group came out and told me so, and so this is what I need to do now. But what if that's not the case?
Right.
And again, that all goes back to the perception of things. In fact, there it even gets tricky because you're dealing with the perception of, let's say you're dealing with two psychics that come into a location. One picks a man, one picks a little girl. And so immediately you go, okay, someone's not telling the truth. But who's to say they're not both picking up on something, both completely different entities or energies, and are absolutely both correct. But what's even more troubling is the thought that you look at specific locations that are rumored to be haunted because they look scary, and someone can concoct a great story based around the scary location. Who's to say that a place that may have never been present with activity is now perceived to be what we call haunted because they've had so many people come through basically feeding a location with energy and their perception and basically making the place haunted themselves. So it's difficult.
And with me, my team's a little different, so I'm probably going to get massacred here. So we, my job as an investigator, our part of the investigative team is to give whatever we may come up with. It's not my job to say, if we come up with an EVP, this is what it is. It's an EVP, this is what we think it is. That's my side of it. Sure. But our other side of our team is all mediums and psychics. So we have 6 medium psychics on our team. So they do let clients know what they're picking up there. And this is where our team's a little bit different because they'll go in and they'll try to help resolve the issues that are there, and they'll inform the clients of what they think's there. And sometimes with certain clients that brings them comfort to know, this is grandma. And it's not just them saying this either. It's them coming up with validations for these clients that make sense. So it's not like we're just saying this is there because this is the evidence we got. This is a whole different thing with our psychics and mediums connecting in. So don't hate me, all of you.
No, and I think that's wonderful. That's a wonderful point. And we don't have that in our group. We come in and, if we catch something on video or an EVP or whatever, we will present it to the client, say, here is a chunk, listen to it, give me your take on it, and that's kind of it. We don't say, nope, it is an old man clinking your drawer every 20 minutes.
Right.
We don't give that definitive, this is what it is. We say, we catch an anomaly, we're going to present it to you, how you want to take it, we can talk about it, but we're not going to put a label on it.
And,
Right.
and Oregon Paranormal, and even Michael White and his group, we rely every now and then upon psychics or sensitives just to gain their perspective on it. And that's why I say, again, just because they pick up on something that we're not there to specifically research doesn't make them wrong.
Right.
But it doesn't make anything credible to a degree. It's all just information that we have to gather, collect, and go through everything.
Here's what I have to contribute about the mediums. I have had a number of different groups over 7-8 years, and when different groups, again, don't know each other, different mediums that don't know each other, come in and consistently report the same thing in the same area, tell me the same story about a person in a space in my building, that lends validity and credibility to what is there. And
Absolutely.
so mediums, one might not necessarily have credibility, but when you get 10 or 12 that say the same thing, you have to stop and question that maybe this is a valid source of it's a valid investigative tool.
You have your various your instruments in that, but it is a tool. It's another tool to try to gain insight into what's going on. And I think one of the biggest things that you have to do as a responsible team member within this community is talk to your client in the first initial conversation and ask them what they want out of an investigation. Mm-hmm. Primarily people just want to know they're not crazy.
Right.
And so if you're able to document that in any way, shape, or form, and they're saying, oh, every night at 2:00 this happens. Okay, well, we're going to be there at 2:00. We're going to try to document that for you. But I think that's the hardest part for people is that, if you do have somebody who is psychic or has paranormal, or has abilities or sensitivities, and they come in and say, oh, I feel over here there's a little boy, and over here there's an older man, and over here is this. It throws off, one, your entire team on what they're doing if you're saying that in front of everybody. Two, it throws off the client. So if a psychic or medium comes into your investigation, they should do their walkthrough and they should document it, whether on audio a recording or writing it down, and then leave, and then see what evidence you can come up with.
We don't have our mediums when we do investigations. They're not on location at all. They usually come in the next day to do what they do. They might remote into the the building beforehand, but they don't ever come on the investigations with us.
What do you feel their accuracy rate is when they do the remoting in?
It's as case manager, it's pretty interesting because we'll have, not every medium is a remoter either, because we have we have 3 active remoters on our team right now, and it's really neat as a case manager to watch, to have one send me something and then have another one, and they don't, when I give them like a case, I'll just give them like a case number. I don't tell them anything else, like this is just the case number, and it's really interesting to see. Sometimes they'll send me in like almost identical, remotes in. They're not always that way, though. Sometimes they'll get different eras, different beans, different, so it's hit and miss, really.
Interesting.
And you know what? Patty brought up a really important part that I want to make sure is touched upon is finding out what the expectation of the client is. Because whether it's just knowledge, whether it's just information, whether it's to find out if a loved one is in the location that they're dwelling in, or whether it's a demon, and can we get rid of it? And unless we know what the ultimate outcome that this client is looking for, I hate to say it, but there's times when you have to be honest and just say, listen, if you're looking for an exorcism, that's nothing we can do. We can't provide you with that. We can't solve this problem. The only thing we can do is share with you what we gather.
I agree with you 100% on that, Jay, because we have had clients call us in and ask us, hey, we think we have a demon in the house. And I'm saying, why are you calling a paranormal group and not a priest?
Yeah,
Right.
because then it's a very then you gain the knowledge that you're dealing with someone who believes it's a very that has a strong religious faith. If they're dealing with something like that, which is something that most paranormal investigators don't follow a specific religious faith. But yeah, it's tough.
That goes back to another pet word I hate is cleansing. We're going to do a cleansing. I despise that word. It's like, what are they? Are they dirty? I mean, what's the problem here? So we call it a resolve or a resolution, but that's always been one of my pet peeve words in the spiritual woo-woo world is cleansing. We're going to go in and cleanse this place.
Well, and that's a very good point, Kristen, because I also want you to consider who's to say that the spiritual being, the energy that you're experiencing, isn't returning because it was one of the locations of the greatest memories of their life.
Exactly.
Why the hell would we go in there and cleanse them or try to rid them of this place when they're coming back here because it made them happy?
Let me tell you, our team believes in free will with spirits, so I have a hard time with people who say they can go in and cleanse a building of all activity because I've never seen it happen.
Yeah.
I've seen Jay needs a cleansing from time to time.
I think you're the one cheering.
My mouth, absolutely.
I think the other piece is that with Katie, I wanted to say something about Katie because Katie, it sounds like you've had these psychics and people with different abilities into your place, and I think when Patty brings up what is it that our clients are looking for, there's some people who, when you go in, they don't want psychics in there. They don't want they like when you talk about cringe words, they cringe at like Ouija board and like all this stuff. That it's very interesting that we have a business owner or a homeowner who is open to these things because there's so many people and who is educated on these things. There's so many people out there who aren't educated on these terms and don't know, and that partially is because of the integrity or not integrity of other groups out there. I think that kind of comes back to what we're trying to do here as much as possible is if somebody out there is a homeowner or something that does not or owns a business of and they feel it's haunted or there's something going on with it, they listen to our show, they should hopefully get some understanding of what's right and what's wrong in terms of ethical treatment of space and the practices, but then also not be as afraid of things like, a psychic is going to bring in a demon, or if I use the Ouija board, I'm going to need an exorcism, right?
Right.
So I really appreciate that we're being able to have these conversations and differing viewpoints on things, because at the end of the day, it seems like sometimes it's splitting a hair, not so much, but we're all on the same page when it comes to we need to help we're in this to help our clients, and finding out what our clients want should be the first thing to ask when we're trying to help them.
Good point. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap things up on a positive note.
You're listening to more Paranormal Radio.
Welcome back. We are about ready to wrap this episode up, but there's a couple things that we still want to get out there. And one of the things that Michael wanted to touch on, we didn't get a chance to touch on in that second half. So, Michael, do you want to go ahead and...
What, me? No, yes.
Yeah.
Well, when Jay was talking, he was talking about what the homeowners' beliefs were. And, beliefs influence every bit of perception on both the homeowners and the investigators' parts. I'll be honest with you. I would say most investigations that I've gone on, 99% of the claims of activity were explainable. But in many of those cases, because of the homeowners' beliefs, and they wanted to believe so badly that their location was haunted, it didn't matter, how much evidence you had to the contrary. One example that I use a lot is whispering in the kitchen. And that was a big claim, certain words, but all whispered. You could hardly make them out. Mm-hmm. And I even heard it. But on closer examination, it was the compressor from the refrigerator. But even when I came back with a stethoscope and put it to the side of the refrigerator and showed them exactly what they were hearing, they would not hear. They would not hear that there was an explanation for it.
Right.
So it becomes very frustrating for legitimate investigators, to come up with a logical explanation for some activity, a claimed activity, and basically falling on deaf ears.
No, I completely agree. That's
what do they say?
Very frustrating.
They say it's very difficult to change somebody's belief, but it's a lot easier to change somebody's ideas.
Yeah.
Right. So, but we cling to our beliefs so heavily sometimes.
And I would say that the majority of paranormal has to do with belief systems.
Yeah.
I want to believe.
Before we wrap up, I want to go down the list and I want to find out what got everybody, like, where did everybody start? Not necessarily their first experience, but what was the driving force to wanting to get into this field of research?
I saw a ghost mine, and it really made me want to join a ghost hunting group.
Isn't that why most of you are here? Isn't that right?
Well, I saw it, and I wanted to be a miner.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you. Finally, someone.
Nicole, let's start with you.
Oh, okay. I'm going to give Ben a lot of credit here, and I'm going to make his ego grow quite large. But I
can edit that out. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you. I owe a lot of it to Ben. I had my own fascination as a kid, but my parents always kind of thwarted it. Like, oh no, it's explainable. It's an old house. You're not seeing that. You just have an active imagination. So I kind of pushed all that down. But I still was really into the macabre, and I loved Stephen King, and I'd read all that stuff, and I really liked it, but I would still just kind of, oh no, it's not real. Mm-hmm. And then when I met Ben and he told me what he does, and I'm like, that's interesting, because I've always had a fascination with it. I've had my own experiences, but there's actually real groups out there. It's not just like Ghostbusters, the movie. And so he brought me in and showed me what it was like, and I was just like, yep, all right, sign me up. And so now here I am.
Awesome. Patty?
Well, I come from a background of the metaphysical, and I've worked within the metaphysical background for over 30 years, and because I'm old, but which is true. I started paranormal investigating back in the early 1990s with groups of friends going to so-called haunted locations, never cemeteries, because I feel that's disrespectful to investigate a cemetery, and just found more and more fascination and came about with people with like minds, and we formed a group. And that's how I came into this. My first experience in the paranormal was at the age of 5. So, I was that kid at the school library, checking out Stranger Than Science paperbacks all the time. And, anytime there was the In Search television show or one of those shows that came on, I was always fascinated with it. So it was just a natural progression for me. I kind of got out of the metaphysical and went into the paranormal.
Do you think your perception of the research has changed over the years?
It has, yeah. Most definitely that. We grow as investigators, hopefully all the time. Mm-hmm. There is the advancement of technology, but there's the advancement, like we've been talking about tonight, of communication between people. Mm-hmm. And doing those things experimentally. I'm finding different ways of doing things. So I think that's what helps the community in a whole, and it helps our clients. Mm-hmm. So, but yes, most definitely the research has changed, and sometimes for the good, sometimes not for the good.
Awesome. Jay.
I got, where did I get my start? I've always been a believer. I always read books. I've always been fascinated. I've had my own experiences ever since Poltergeist and seeing the scientists in the kitchen and the living room with all their equipment. I was sold. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a parapsychologist when I was a kid. And then I got into high school and started growing up and thinking, this isn't going to work out because I hate math and science, so screw it. But it wasn't until after Ghost Mine and getting to meet people at the, I think it was the second annual Oregon Ghost Conference that I went to, and that was the first time I was exposed to a community of these people that I just went, oh my gosh, they're passionate, they're educated, they're smart. This is something I could really get into. And then, of course, meeting all of you guys and your skill sets, and I got sucked into it, and here I am. Now, granted, my approach to things is very different, given my passion for historical locations, Western history, things like that, ghost towns. Oh, I love ghost towns. Anything abandoned or rusting or condemned, I want to go in and I want to find the history of it. It's that history and that fascination that can be found that I feel lends to the credibility of some paranormal activity, and that's what I want to find out.
Awesome. Kristen?
Oh boy, we're going to get crazy sounding here. Okay, hold on. My first experience with the paranormal was my aunt had a haunted house. She lived in a haunted house when we were kids, and we saw things there, heard the footsteps, yada, yada, most investigators. Adults didn't believe us, of course. Flash forward to 1990, in the 90s, I lived in a house, and it was haunted. But I was always the mom that was involved with everything. I was PTA mom, Girl Scout leader mom, did everything mom. So when my daughter graduated from high school, I decided that I was going to get into the paranormal because I was going to prove it. I was going to prove the paranormal to everybody. I was going to prove it. That's not how I understand now. That's not how it works. So the first team I was on, I joined, was a disaster. Think of a ghost hunting show on crack, and that's what it was. It was not myself, but these were things I saw, provoking. Everything I detest now were things that were happening.
You got your start on Ghost Adventures?
A Ghost Adventures-like team, okay? No. So at Kenton Station, where I do my monthly tours at, we did an investigation there, and there was a female spirit that I had an empathic link with. This is where I said it's going to get weird sounding. And I just can't explain, but I felt this spirit's pain and agony. And I decided from that point that I was going to be on a team. I'm almost getting teared up thinking about her.
I know, I can hear you tearing up.
Hold on.
You are a total freak, Kristen.
Yeah, because all of a sudden I'm getting these feelings again. Okay, maybe I need to move on. Anyway, White Light ended up coming on a tour there, and they ended up being able to help this lady move on. I'm sorry, I don't know what's happening.
This is good radio.
No, this is fascinating.
Investigator down. We have an investigator down.
I was going to say, I wish we had some equipment around you to gather information right now.
Anyway, so I knew from that point on I wanted to work more with spirits in a way that I could help them. And I don't know what is happening right now, because all of a sudden all these feelings started coming back. So, okay, now I've embarrassed myself. Thank you.
I really think this, more than anything, shows how the dedication and passion that most of us have.
Yeah.
And I think there's no way of explaining it other than just hearing in your voice and what you're going through right now is perfect, because, I mean, this isn't a hobby that people take up lightly. This is not something that we just do. This becomes a part of our lives, and people that are outside of this community don't understand that. And people who have stuff happening to them, prospective clients, people in the future who like, wow, I moved into this house or something's happening, I don't know what's going on. They're at the place, they can hear you right now and say, I'm not alone.
I'm back. I'm good. But yeah, that was bringing up a lot of emotions that I felt when I connected with this spirit. So anyway, that's how I came to be on this team.
Yeah, Kristen, I'd just like to say you're now my number one favorite freak ever.
I'm the freak to be.
Pressure's on, Michael. Now you're going to have to top that.
Well, I don't know if I can top that. I mean, Kristen is very passionate, and I do admire and appreciate that. I had a lot of weird occurrences when I was a kid. I think some of them may have been paranormal. But I was just a weird kid. I mean, I was always watching the Munsters and the Addams Family and reading creepy and eerie magazines and Edgar Allan Poe. But it didn't really strike me as something I wanted to get into until I saw a movie in 1973 called The Legend of Hell House. And if you've ever watched that movie, pay attention to what the head scientist is doing there. It's the same thing that we're doing now. I mean, it's, just different equipment. Ours is a lot smaller, which is kind of nice. But, man, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And I think that has kind of kept me going. And then throughout my time in the Navy, I was always, taking off when we went into one port or another after investigating what, castle or something might be there that had some kind of a ghost. I wanted to go see it. I wanted to experience that. And I've been able to experience a lot of strange occurrences, which may or may not have been paranormal, or, but I didn't have equipment to document it, so I can't really say.
Right.
But, those things that really hit home, though, even though I'm really, a hard data guy, it's personal experiences that make the difference, and, I mean, being in the catacombs of St. Catherine's Fort in Bermuda and then, hearing my name whispered in my ear when I'm with nobody,
right.
And I know that my name had never been called, so how did this whatever, hear it? So it's just strange, and that keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. Katie, I know that you're not an investigator, but I'm interested to, now that you've kind of been exposed to this community and to your residents, what is your outlook? How do you feel about things at the moment?
Very positive always. I happened upon the community on accident. I bought this place on accident. It's turned out very well, but I never envisioned myself as being in a place that my world would be so filled with so many beautiful spirits, alive and alive in a different way. And I love everybody equally, but my learning curve here started from zero, and then I realized that there was something happening that I didn't quite understand. And I was very fortunate in the beginning to find a couple of people found me. Dave Galvin was the first investigator here.
Yeah.
And then I had some bad experiences with investigators, but after about 8 years, I've come to an angle of repose with my building and my permanent guests and the paranormal community as a whole, to know what's real and what's not real. And if my reality here isn't everybody else's, I'm okay with that, because I live here every day and I know what's here. And the learning curve has been tremendous, but I'm grateful. I'm very, very grateful. I stopped here and stayed on accident and found out it was for sale, and so I bought it without knowing anything about anything, and it's turned out okay.
Awesome. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap this up. I want to thank everybody for taking the time. I know this was a very long episode, but I think it was an important one because there are a lot of topics that just don't get talked about a lot.
Thank you so very much for even considering me to be a part of this.
Thanks for being a part of it.
Thank you all, and thanks for listening. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having us.